I still remember the day I unlocked the door to my grandmother's old boathouse in Heritage Harbor, feeling equal parts excitement and dread. If you're watching this, I'd love for you to comment below and let me know from which place you're following along, because there's something about returning to a worn, weathered doorstep that instantly makes you question every life decision. The memory of my childhood summers came flooding back as soon as I saw the chipped blue paint and the faded wicker chairs on the deck. I told myself that I had come here to honor Grandma Evelyn's legacy. But the truth was, I also needed a refuge from the fast-paced chaos that had turned my life into a constant sprint. The surrounding cypress trees swayed in the breeze like old friends gossiping about my return. And I couldn't shake the feeling that those hushed voices carried warnings of secrets yet to be unearthed. My name is Morgan, and at that point I had no idea how deeply I was about to be ensnared in a battle that would rattle the entire coastal community. Little did I know that someone else had their eyes on this land, someone who wasn't about to let me settle in without a fight. Diana Blackwell's seemingly polite welcome was the first harbinger that my presence here disrupted more than just the dust on the mantle. I had come to reclaim a family legacy only to stumble into an arena of hidden motives and desperate schemes, forcing me to forge alliances I never expected. I soon realized that I required a dependable legal mind to help me navigate the complexities of property rights and environmental accords. That's when I reconnected with Sophia Chen, an old college friend turned environmental lawyer who fortunately had recently moved to the neighboring county. She was quick to respond when I called, intrigued by the notion of an old coastal protection covenant pitted against the ambitions of a ruthless property development corporation. As she arrived one morning in her weather-beaten Jeep, the seriousness in her eyes told me she sensed the gravity of the situation. Together, we pored over every line of the Heritage Harbor Covenant, meticulously examining its legitimacy. According to Sophia, the document included multiple clauses that limited any significant commercial construction on protected wetlands. There were also penalty sections that, if enforced, could bar offenders from developing anything in the region indefinitely. The revelations thrilled and frightened me in equal measure. If the covenant was still binding, Blackwell Development's grand plans for expansions would be rendered illegal, effectively halting the dream project Diana had been championing. Sophia insisted on meeting with the county clerk to verify the covenant's authenticity, suggesting that we keep our efforts quiet until we were certain of our findings. She also recommended I speak with any surviving members who might recall details not captured in the official text. My eyes lit up when I remembered that Grandma's old friend, Mateo Rivera, still lived on the far side of the harbor. He was rumored to be a veritable repository of local lore. Before we could celebrate our potential discovery, a persistent knock rattled my front door, followed by Diana's voice echoing outside. She had come with forms and permits in hand, telling me that Blackwell Development insisted on immediate inspections for safety compliance. I locked eyes with Sophia, and we both recognized this would be no easy fight. Diana was pushing her agenda, and I needed to stand firm or risk losing everything my grandmother held dear. During her inspection, Diana strode through the boathouse with the calculated air of someone assessing a property's weaknesses, not out of care, but rather as if she were an appraiser with a hidden checklist. Her eyes flicked over exposed beams, the archaic electrical wiring, and the creaky floorboards, noting each imperfection with a frown that barely masked her satisfaction. She rattled off a litany of so-called safety concerns, making sure I understood that Blackwell Development took these issues seriously and would have to review them in depth. It was clear she wanted to bury me in compliance requirements, hoping the financial burden might push me out. Every time I tried to interject about the historical significance of the boathouse or mention the documents I'd found, she politely dismissed me, claiming her company had final say over any renovations or expansions. The tension reached an uncomfortable height when she hinted that the property could be condemned if I didn't act swiftly. Her veneer of politeness was beginning to show cracks, and the underlying threat loomed large. In the swirl of her insinuations, I could sense she was masking bigger ambitions, perhaps the intention to redevelop this entire area into a high-end marina or luxury condominium complex. The moment she stepped out, I allowed myself a long breath. I glanced around the old living room with its stone fireplace and aged furniture, feeling the weight of preserving not just a structure, but an entire legacy. The boathouse was my inheritance, but it was also a piece of history. and the more Diana pushed, the more I felt compelled to defend it with every resource I had at my disposal. I wasted no time reaching out to Mateo Rivera, the one person I believed might hold pieces of this puzzle that no official record could capture. He was delighted to hear from me, and within days I found myself sitting at his cozy kitchen table, sipping coffee under the watchful gaze of old photographs lining his walls. Mateo had a gentle warmth about him, a resilience that came from having weathered many storms, both literal and figurative, in Heritage Harbor. When I mentioned the Covenant and the Blackwell name, his eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a kind of resigned sadness. He told me how years ago the families around the harbor had come together to sign that document with Grandma Evelyn as a driving force. They wanted to protect the natural environment against reckless development. Mateo recalled that the Blackwells had been the biggest supporters at first, actively promoting the idea of safeguarding the land. But over time, greed and shifting priorities had eroded those commitments. He also hinted at a more specific betrayal, something involving backdoor deals and hush money, though he didn't elaborate. I listened attentively, feeling my heart pound. Mateo spoke of a penalty clause within the covenant, a powerful clause that could become the downfall of anyone who violated its terms. But rumor had it that entire pages detailing these penalties were left out of many local files. My mind raced. If Diana's family was indeed the same line of Blackwells that once championed conservation, then their blatant disregard for the environment now was not only hypocritical, but also possibly legally damning. I thanked Mateo for his time and promised I'd keep him updated. As I left his home, the late afternoon light filtered through the cypress trees, reminding me that even in shadows there was a glow of hope. The deeper I delved, the more resolute I became, that I was fighting for something much larger than myself. One day, a pivotal moment arrived in the form of a coded reference in the margins of the covenant that Sophia and I had almost overlooked. Scrolled in what looked like my grandmother's handwriting was a short note pointing to a storage facility in a nearby town. The note mentioned it contained key documents for the future of Heritage Harbor. My pulse quickened as I realized we might finally find the missing pages referencing the penalty clause or any other hidden details that could turn the tide in our favor. We wasted no time driving there, the sun just breaking through the horizon as we pulled into a silent half-abandoned complex of storage units. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight as we pried open the unit and discovered a battered trunk filled with yellowed papers, ledgers, and photographs. Sophia carefully flipped through them while I sifted for anything that looked remotely official. We hit the jackpot when we found a folded legal document signed and sealed with the unmistakable presence of the original community members' signatures. My breath caught in my throat as I read the penalty clauses in full. They stipulated that if any signatory or their descendants violated the conservation terms, they would forfeit the right to develop any land within the entire Heritage Harbor region for a full century, among other ramifications. That was the smoking gun we needed. Driving back, I could almost see Grandma's proud smile. The sense of triumph, however, was short-lived when we noticed an unfamiliar black SUV trailing us. My phone buzzed incessantly with unknown calls. As soon as we got back to the boathouse, we discovered that the lock on my front door was smashed and the place had been ransacked. The trunk's precious contents became more critical than ever, and I vowed not to let them fall into the wrong hands. In the aftermath of the break-in, I felt my nerves on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder. The intruder had overturned drawers, scattered my research notes across the floor, and left a strong message. I was playing a dangerous game. Sophia insisted that we contact the authorities immediately, but we both harbored doubts about how much we could trust local law enforcement. After all, Diana seemed to have deep ties to various community pillars, and Blackwell Development's influence was intimidating. Still, we lodged a police report. The officer who arrived conducted a cursory examination, nodding sympathetically while jotting down statements, but his eyes seemed distant, as if he already suspected we were in over our heads. I stored the newly found documents in a lockbox with hidden compartments, taking every precaution to keep them safe. Word soon spread through the neighborhood about the break-in, and I was surprised by how many neighbors quietly expressed support. Some whispered that they had always disliked how controlling Blackwell Development had become. Yet, their fear of retaliation kept them from openly opposing Diana and her husband, Victor. My determination grew as I realized that I wasn't just fighting for my own inheritance. I was fighting for everyone who felt cornered by the oppressive tactics of those wielding power in our small coastal community. Late that evening, I combed through old photographs of the harbor, the marshlands, and the families who once lived here in harmony. I thought of Grandma Evelyn's unwavering dedication to preserving the place she loved. With every memory, I steeled myself further, aware that the real battle was just beginning. Secrets were unraveling, and with each thread I pulled, I edged closer to a confrontation that would shake Heritage Harbor to its core. A few days later, I arrived at a tense town hall meeting, determined to face Diana and Victor head-on. The gathering was held in a small municipal building with fluorescent lighting that buzzed overhead, adding to the atmosphere of uncomfortable scrutiny. Diana presided at the front, her polished smile and clipped tone indicating she was firmly in control. Victor stood near her, offering silent backing, occasionally glancing toward me with thinly veiled hostility. Dozens of homeowners filled the room, some curious, others apprehensive. As I stepped up to the microphone to address the crowd, my heart pounded, but I forced myself to project a calm, firm voice. I spoke about the historical significance of the land, referencing my grandmother's role in establishing the covenant. Then I unveiled the original documents, brandishing the penalty clauses for all to see. A murmur of shock rippled through the room as I explained that any development plans championed by Blackwell, if in violation of these stipulations, would be illegal. Diana tried to cut me off, claiming the covenant was outdated, but Sophia stepped in to clarify its continued legality under state environmental law. Emotions flared, and a chorus of voices demanded answers. I locked eyes with Diana, her composure cracking as she realized the gravity of what had been revealed. Victor looked equally furious, but a hint of panic flickered in his eyes. After a heated back and forth, the meeting adjourned in chaos, leaving me with a bittersweet triumph. My revelations had shifted the power dynamics, but I sensed a storm gathering. Diana wasn't about to relinquish her aspirations so easily, and I braced myself for whatever countermove she had planned. True to form, Diana launched a propaganda campaign almost immediately. She began circulating memos claiming the covenant was a forgery and that I was attempting to derail positive community developments for personal gain. Colorful brochures showed artist renderings of a so-called Heritage Harbor Renaissance featuring luxury condominiums, upscale restaurants, and a mega-yacht marina that promised to revitalize the local economy. The entire proposal was a blatant contradiction to the environmental protections so many had once supported, but Diana's professional marketing made it appear beneficial to residents. My mailbox overflowed with pamphlets discussing increased property values, job opportunities, and boosted tourism. The glossy images hardly mentioned the wetland destruction and ecological impact that would inevitably follow. In small print at the bottom, I caught references to a limited environmental assessment that suspiciously did not align with the covenant's stringent rules. I grew disheartened, but refused to be silenced, distributing counterflyers highlighting the penalties for violating the protected status and reminding people of their original commitment to preserving the harbor's natural beauty. Meanwhile, rumors spread that Diana was pulling strings with local government officials, offering them a slice of the lucrative development revenue in exchange for rubber-stamped approvals. Late one night, I found a private message slipped under my door, warning me to mind my own business if I knew what was good for me. The intimidation tactics only sharpened my resolve. If Diana believed she could bend the law to her will, she was in for a rude awakening. The boathouse's creaking floorboards and weathered walls fueled my determination, each creak reminding me of the heritage at stake. Grandma Evelyn had fought to protect these wetlands from exploitation, and I intended to carry that torch, come what may. My phone rang incessantly over the following week, often from unknown numbers. Sometimes I'd pick up and hear only silence on the other end before the line cut off. Other times I heard voices muttering threats or mocking my efforts to cling to a useless relic of the past. Sophia advised me to record every call, compile evidence, and be prepared to present it if a legal confrontation escalated. Despite the intimidation, a growing faction of residents began to rally behind my cause. Quietly, they confided that Diana had bullied them for years with draconian zoning rules, like mandating certain architectural styles or imposing outrageous fines for minor infractions. Some recounted how the Blackwells had twisted a community association into a personal instrument of control, using fear and vague promises of prosperity. The more these neighbors shared, the more it became clear that Diana's power was rooted in illusions and intimidation rather than genuine communal benefit. In solidarity, a handful of them volunteered to testify that they witnessed suspicious manipulations of the official records concerning the harbor and its ecological status. Bolstered by this support, I began planning a formal legal challenge. With Sophia leading the charge, we scheduled a court hearing to present the original covenant, our evidence of tampering, and affidavits from those willing to speak out. Knowing how much Diana had at stake, I braced myself for her next move, certain she wouldn't sit idly by while her carefully orchestrated dream of turning Heritage Harbor into a cash machine went up in smoke. Late at night, as I reviewed boxes of documents by the glow of an old desk lamp, I tried to maintain a sense of humor, telling myself that if it weren't so serious, it would be almost laughable how far someone would go to exploit a place that was meant to be protected and cherished. Sure enough, Diana escalated matters in a way I could hardly have foreseen. One morning, I woke up to discover heavy construction equipment had arrived at the edge of the wetlands near the harbor's shoreline. Huge machines were poised to begin what the posted sign referred to as preliminary clearing for a recreational park. The move was brazen, as if Diana believed that by starting the work, she could claim the area was already under construction before we had a chance to halt it legally. Outraged, I marched out to confront the workers, brandishing copies of the covenant and warning them that any activity here was illegal. Some stared at me blankly, while others shrugged, saying they were just following orders. A supervisor met me with a dismissive smirk, implying that their permits were fully in order. I snapped photos of the equipment, the posted signs, and the people involved, intending to use them as evidence. Sophia assured me that a cease and desist order could be filed rapidly, but bureaucracy moved sluggishly. In the meantime, bulldozers threatened to tear down centuries-old cypress trees. My heart raced with anxiety and fury coursed through my veins. I recalled the day Grandma took me kayaking in that very spot, teaching me about respecting the balance of nature. Seeing the wetlands on the brink of destruction brought tears of frustration to my eyes, but it also fueled a burning desire to save what we could. That same evening, a spontaneous protest formed around the site with neighbors holding up signs demanding a halt to the project. Diana arrived, flanked by security personnel, determined to quell the outcry. Tensions ran high, words were exchanged, and for a moment I worried violence might erupt. The confrontation ended with Diana proclaiming that progress was unstoppable and we would regret standing in her way. My resolve was tested, but I refused to back down. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I anticipated. The courthouse was an imposing structure of weathered brick, echoing with footsteps and hushed conversations. Reporters had gathered outside, sniffing out the scandal. Some had latched onto the narrative of a small-town dispute turning into a full-blown legal battle over environmental concerns. Others seemed more interested in the personal feud between me and the formidable Diana Blackwell, painting it as a David and Goliath showdown. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Sophia stood beside me, flipping through stacks of documents that spelled out the covenant's history and the suspicious alterations that had stripped away vital clauses. Diana arrived in a tailored suit, her husband, Victor, trailing behind with a tablet glued to his hand, no doubt coordinating some last-minute maneuver. Their attorney was a slick corporate type, brandishing thick binders and projecting an air of supreme confidence. As proceedings began, each side presented opening statements. Our strategy hinged on proving the covenant's legal validity and highlighting the Blackwells' direct violation of its conservation mandates. Diana's attorney attempted to discredit the documents, alleging that they were incomplete and possibly fabricated. But when we introduced the pages we discovered in Grandma's storage unit, complete with signatures and seals from recognized community leaders and notaries, the courtroom buzzed with renewed interest. Expert testimony from a forensic specialist bolstered our assertion that these documents were genuine and historically tied to the land's legal status. Throughout it all, Diana maintained a placid composure, as though convinced her well-paid legal team would tear our argument apart. Yet, in the final moments, Sophia delivered a powerful rebuttal, pointing out that Diana herself was the direct descendant of one of the original signatories, whose signature was visible on our authenticated copy. The contradiction was glaring, a fact that even the judge noted with a raised eyebrow. When the first day ended, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and cautious hope. The next session would be crucial for the final judgment, and I knew Diana had more tricks up her sleeve. Days blurred together as the entire community awaited the final court date. Meanwhile, I found refuge in moments of relative calm, often walking by the harbor at sunset. The golden light reflecting off the ripples seemed to whisper of times past, of simpler days when nature was cherished rather than commodified. I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, tidying up the boathouse and restoring minor damages. Each scratch on the wall or dent in the furniture told a story of the generations that had called this place home. Late one evening, I received a visit from Miguel Torres, a distant cousin who'd heard about my predicament and decided to offer his support. He arrived with a folder of old letters he had uncovered in his attic, letters that Grandma had written to various environmental advocacy groups championing the harbor's protection. Although not legally binding, these letters added another layer to the narrative, illustrating Grandma's lifelong commitment. We spent hours poring over them, pausing occasionally to share fond memories of family gatherings under the cypress trees. Miguel also shared his belief that the community needed a communal space where residents could gather, free from the rigid control of Blackwell development. It sparked an idea in me, one that would only bear fruit if we won the case. Perhaps the very building that Diana used for her presentations could be repurposed into a community center focusing on environmental education, a place for children to learn about the diverse ecosystems thriving just outside their doorsteps. My heart warmed at the thought, finding renewed energy in the possibility of forging a future that honored the past. The next morning, I awoke determined to push onward no matter the cost. Knowing that Diana's influence was waning with each piece of evidence we brought to light. When the morning of the final court appearance arrived, I stepped into the hallway outside the courtroom to find Diana huddled in urgent conversation with her attorney. Their faces were pinched, stress lines deepening with every whispered exchange. Victor paced nearby, occasionally peering at his watch as if expecting reinforcements. I caught a flicker of panic in his gaze. It made me wonder if their entire empire of half-truths and intimidation was finally crumbling. Inside, the judge wasted no time. He called the court to order and began delivering his decision in a calm, measured voice. My heart pounded like a drum as he detailed the legal findings, confirming that the original covenant was indeed valid and that the missing clauses, including the strict penalty for violations, remained in force. The judge went on to enumerate how the Blackwell's development plans directly conflicted with the conservation stipulations, rendering any permits issued under false pretenses null and void. A hush fell over the gallery as the judge instructed that all construction activities cease immediately and that penalties could be pursued against anyone who knowingly breached the terms of the covenant. In that moment, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, a wave of relief washing over me. The Heritage Harbor Renaissance project was dead on arrival. A flurry of activity followed the judge's pronouncement. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing to capture quotes from anyone who would speak. Sophia gripped my shoulder in a gesture that conveyed both victory and exhaustion. Diana attempted to maintain her composure as she addressed the media, but her words faltered. She insisted that she had only ever acted in the best interests of the community, blaming administrative oversights for any discrepancies. Victor stood behind her with a shell-shocked expression as if the foundation of his world had just collapsed under him. Watching them struggle to spin the narrative, I almost felt pity, almost. But then I recalled the threats, the vandalism, and the fear they had sown with impunity. I felt no sympathy for their downfall, only gratitude that the truth had finally prevailed. As I stepped outside the courthouse, a group of residents applauded. Some shook my hand, thanking me for fighting a fight they hadn't known how to wage. One woman tearfully explained that her late father had helped sign the covenant many years ago, and she had been heartbroken to see it disregarded. My heart swelled with a sense of solidarity, realizing that this victory wasn't just mine or Grandma's. It belonged to every voice that refused to be bullied. The press clamored for statements, and though I was still reeling from the emotional high, I tried to articulate the essence of our battle. This is about protecting what matters most, our heritage, our environment, and our freedom from intimidation, I managed to say, though my voice shook slightly. In that moment, a burden lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, we could chart a new path for Heritage Harbor, free from the shadows of corruption and greed. In the days that followed, a series of legal repercussions rained down on Diana and Victor Blackwell. Investigations unearthed evidence of bribery attempts, documentation for falsified permits, and suspicious monetary transactions pointing to a broader network of manipulation. The local press, now emboldened by the public's appetite for the story, dug deeper into the Blackwells' financials, revealing staggering amounts of money funneled into hush funds. Additional neighbors came forward with testimonies describing how they were coerced into silence through threats of lawsuits and zoning violations. Meanwhile, Blackwell Development itself unraveled as more board members resigned, unwilling to be associated with Diana's tarnished legacy. It was as if a dam had broken, allowing truth to flood every corner of the community that had been stifled for too long. I found myself in a whirlwind of interviews and thank you notes. People wrote to express their gratitude or share how the story had inspired them to take a stand in their own local disputes. One evening, as I sat on the Boathouse's deck, sipping a cool drink and watching the sunset, a deep sense of peace settled over me. The cypress trees rustled softly, as though acknowledging that justice had been served. With the development halted and legal action taken to enforce the conservation measures, the wetlands that Grandma loved so much could breathe freely again. While Diana still tried to salvage her reputation, the court's ruling was definitive. Her development project was cancelled, and her personal liability in breaching the covenant was being examined. Even from my vantage point, I could see that she faced substantial lawsuits that might wipe out whatever fortune she had amassed. I had little doubt that she regretted ever underestimating the power of a determined community standing on the side of the law and conscience. Time has a way of softening the rough edges of conflict, but it also provides space for reflection. Over the next few weeks, I spent my mornings working with volunteers to restore the areas where the bulldozers had torn into the earth. The damaged sections of wetland were replanted with native species, a small but symbolic act of restoration. The sound of children laughing as they helped release rescued wildlife back into the habitat was a balm to my weary spirit, reminding me that future generations deserve to inherit this land just as Grandma had intended. Simultaneously, I immersed myself in discussions with community members about transforming the old Blackwell Development headquarters into a coastal education center. Miguel Torres and Sofia Chin threw themselves wholeheartedly into the project, each bringing unique talents. Miguel drew up a blueprint that replaced the sterile conference rooms with an open exhibition space, a small library of environmental texts, and an interactive display about local wildlife. Sofia connected us with nonprofits that specialized in conservation education, hoping to secure grants to fund our endeavor. Before long, we had the beginnings of a true community-driven initiative. Each time I looked at the blueprint, I felt a flutter of excitement, envisioning a place where residents could gather for workshops, lectures, and social events without the looming fear of corporate greed destroying their natural surroundings. Even as legal procedures continued against Diana and Victor, life in Heritage Harbor began to shift. The sense of anxiety that had once permeated the air was replaced by cautious optimism. For me personally, the Boathouse had evolved from a familiar relic into a tangible testament of hope and renewal. Not everything was a smooth ride, of course. The shadow of Diana's legacy lingered in the form of incomplete permits, battered finances, and unresolved legal battles. A handful of her staunch supporters still believed that I was a meddler who had cost the town a golden economic opportunity. Some openly scowled when they passed by on the street, muttering under their breath that I doomed Heritage Harbor to stagnation. Their accusations stung, but I stood by the belief that the best progress is one that doesn't sacrifice the soul of a place for the sake of profit. Besides, for every detractor, there seemed to be 2 or 3 supporters who offered heartfelt words of encouragement. Mateo Rivera's eyes sparkled whenever he visited, praising the strong stand we had taken, and marveling at how Grandma Evelyn would have been proud to see her vision upheld. It felt surreal to think of how far we'd come. From discovering a dusty old contract in a storage unit to spearheading a communal revival. As I strolled through the cypress groves one late afternoon, the wind carried the gentle hum of wildlife. Birds fluttered overhead and the sun's rays pierced through the canopy, illuminating a path that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. In that moment, I felt the magnitude of what had been saved. This wasn't just about land or trees. It was about preserving a tapestry of memories and forging a legacy that would outlive us all. My phone buzzed, reminding me of an upcoming meeting with the county officials to finalize the protective status of the area. The fight wasn't fully over. Paperwork, administrative hurdles, and local politics remained. But the heart of the battle had been won, and for the first time in ages, I felt the sweet relief of hope overcoming exhaustion. The day we officially signed the documents reaffirming the enforceable protection of the Heritage Harbor Covenant was almost as momentous as winning the court case itself. A small ceremony took place at the edge of the wetlands with county representatives, environmental advocates, and community members gathered to witness the signing. The atmosphere was celebratory yet dignified, as though everyone understood they were becoming part of a legacy that transcended individual ambition. I found myself choking up as I added my signature to the updated Register of Land Conservation, effectively linking Grandma Evelyn's original endeavor to this new chapter. Afterward, an impromptu celebration broke out, complete with homemade specialties, grilled seafood, and a sense of camaraderie that had been absent for too long. In the midst of the festivities, children laughed by the water's edge, skipping stones and watching herons wade through the shallows. Meanwhile, older folks reminisced about their youth, recalling how the harbor had once been a hub for fishing, kayaking, and community gatherings. For a moment, the decades that separated us seemed to dissolve, leaving only a shared appreciation for the natural beauty surrounding us. Diana and Victor were nowhere in sight, presumably dealing with the fallout of their legal troubles. I did overhear someone mention that Victor had tried to relocate to another state, seeking to escape the backlash of public opinion. I felt a pang of pity, but it was overshadowed by relief. I remembered the threats, the intimidation, and the way they had nearly succeeded in their plan to transform this sacred land into a playground for the wealthy. The weight of what we had preserved settled on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a comforting reminder that we had done the right thing. Even the cypress trees swaying gently in the breeze seemed to sigh with contentment, as though they recognized that this victory was theirs as much as it was ours. In the subsequent weeks, the old Blackwell development building began its transformation. Walls were knocked down to create open, airy spaces. Volunteers armed with paintbrushes and a contagious zest arrived daily to contribute to the metamorphosis. Donation drives provided shelves, books, and interactive displays. Some local artists even offered to create murals depicting the wildlife and the historical timeline of Heritage Harbor. Each day I marveled at how people from all walks of life pitched in, united by a newfound sense of ownership in their community. Miguel became the de facto project manager, orchestrating everything from the building design to the scheduling of workshops once the center opened. He joked that he'd never expected to become a community coordinator, but life had a knack for leading us down surprising paths. Sophia, meanwhile, offered free legal advice sessions once a week, helping residents with everything from complicated property questions to minor disputes that might have otherwise been handled poorly under Blackwell's influence. As for me, I couldn't step into the building without feeling a surge of pride and a twinge of disbelief. The very space that Diana had once monopolized as a throne room for her authority was turning into a hub for transparency, education, and unity. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I stood in the center of the newly painted main hall. Light fixtures cast a gentle glow over the bright, welcoming space. A wave of gratitude washed over me, and I silently thanked Grandma Evelyn for guiding me here. The process was far from finished. There were still months of work ahead, but the foundation had been laid. It was more than a renovation of a building. It was the renovation of a community's spirit. Mateo Rivera invited me one Sunday to his modest home for a small celebration, a heartfelt gathering honoring our triumphant efforts to revitalize conservation in Heritage Harbor. Though the event was informal, the air buzzed with gratitude and unity. Neighbors filled his living room, sharing memories of falling in love with the harbor and the wetland trails while munching on homemade empanadas. Soft music played in the background, interweaving with gentle conversations that recalled happier times and hopes for the future. Near a bookshelf lined with cherished photo albums, Mateo, his eyes bright with pride, handed me a worn journal that had once belonged to my grandmother Evelyn. As I traced my fingers over the faded ink of her sketches and musings on nature's delicate balance, I was overwhelmed by the sense that she was right there with me, whispering dreams of a sustainable future. Tears of joy and humility welled in my eyes. The journal was a message from the past, affirming that we had come so far despite the struggles. Soon after, the day of Diana's indictment hearing arrived. Local news channels, hungry for the dramatic finale, showed footage of Diana stepping out of a sleek black sedan escorted by her lawyer. Once so confident in her ability to manipulate the system, her tense demeanor and darting eyes betrayed the enormity of the charges against her: fraud, conspiracy to violate environmental laws, and misuse of corporate funds, among others. Watching her on screen was surreal. Just a few months ago, she had seemed invincible, her polished smile concealing ruthless ambition. Now her empire appeared reduced to hushed corridors and damning testimonies. When her lawyer requested a brief continuance, the judge's swift approval signified that the legal noose was tightening around her. As I stared at the blank screen after the coverage ended, I realized that this was not merely a personal vindication, but a clear message that entrenched corruption could be rooted out by persistence and truth. In the weeks that followed, life in Heritage Harbor began to shift in remarkable ways. Where ominous signs of invasive construction had once loomed, young saplings and native plants now sprouted vibrantly thanks to a community-driven restoration initiative. The land seemed to speak of resilience, reminding us that nature was the true protagonist of our story. My energy shifted to finalizing preparations for the community center's grand opening, a project that symbolized our collective renewal. The center, which housed exhibits on the Heritage Harbor Covenant, displayed photos, articles, and even a glass case preserving the original copy of the Covenant, offered a tangible connection to Grandma Evelyn's vision. In the days leading up to the ceremony, I caught my reflection in the Boathouse's mirror. A person older, wiser, and steadied by hardship, yet filled with hope. I tenderly traced a worn photograph of Grandma and me by the harbor, silently thanking her for guiding me through the darkest moments. On the morning of the grand opening, the sun cast shimmering reflections across the harbor, infusing the community center's lawn with a festive brilliance. Volunteers arranged folding chairs, set up a makeshift stage, and hung cheerful bunting and balloons. As people trickled in, ranging from longtime residents to curious newcomers, I greeted each with a heartfelt smile, knowing that what we had built was not just a structure, but a beacon of hope and collaboration. Sophia, ever vigilant, scanned the crowd for any lingering legal issues, while Miguel orchestrated the display of a large banner proclaiming, Heritage Harbor Community and Conservation Center Grand Opening. At the podium, my hands trembled with both nerves and excitement as I recounted the trials we had endured, carefully avoiding any gloating about Diana's downfall. I spoke of the transformation we had collectively achieved, thanking Grandma Evelyn for her enduring vision. In a moment of vulnerability, I admitted that every cypress knee, every shifting tide reminded me of her timeless presence, guiding our fight for justice and conservation. Amid enthusiastic applause, Miguel ceremoniously cut the ribbon and the crowd surged inside to explore interactive displays and historical exhibits that celebrated the land and its heritage. Later, as the celebration wound down, I found solace in a quiet conversation with Mateo. Leaning on his cane, he gazed at a newly installed mural depicting the evolution of Heritage Harbor from its humble beginnings to its current revival. In rich shades of blue and green, the mural told tales of a community once oppressed by greed and now reborn through unity. "Your grandmother would be so proud," he said softly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears that mirrored my own. His words, woven with both nostalgia and hope, confirmed that everything Diana had attempted to undermine, our shared sense of unity, stewardship, and deep-rooted community memory, had found new life in our efforts. Standing there, I felt deeply that we were not merely celebrating a victory against corruption, but also embracing a future defined by respect for nature and for one another. As the evening light faded, I stepped outside and watched the moon cast gentle shadows among the cypress trees, feeling the quiet approval of the wetlands itself. In that moment, I understood that our struggles had forged an unbreakable bond, and Heritage Harbor would forever stand as a testament to the enduring power of community and conservation. Over the next several days, the momentum grew as local youth groups began planning environmental camps at the new community center, and neighbors organized a small butterfly garden on a vacant lot adjacent to the property. The local school board even proposed field trips so students could learn about the original covenant, conservation practices, and local ecology firsthand. My schedule overflowed with phone calls and emails, but the busyness energized me instead of wearing me down. Occasionally, I would catch a news update mentioning Diana Blackwell and her ongoing court case, reminding me of the remnants of her influence. She was now rarely seen in public, instead absorbed in legal wranglings that promised serious repercussions. The media's attention had shifted away from her grand vision of luxury developments to scandalous allegations of embezzlement and intimidation. Meanwhile, the ostentatious Blackwell mansion on the bluff endured heavy scrutiny, with rumors that Victor even attempted to sell the property only to be stymied by pending litigation. I often wondered whether Diana or Victor ever paused to reflect on the harm they had caused. Yet, I refused to be distracted by their missteps. Instead, I focused on nurturing the new community spirit that was forming around the center. We organized a Night Under the Cypresses event, inviting local musicians and storytellers to perform under the stars. With the wetlands serving as our natural amphitheater, families brought blankets. Children's laughter filled the air, and local artisans showcased crafts inspired by the region's flora and fauna. Standing amidst the enthusiastic crowd, I felt an intangible spark of community pride. The voices that had once been silenced by fear now rang out confidently, forging a fresh identity for Heritage Harbor, an identity that embraced nature, justice, and unity over exploitation and greed. In this renewed atmosphere, my boathouse once again felt like a sanctuary, free of the dread of unannounced inspections or vandalism. I enjoyed simple pleasures, watching the morning mist roll over the harbor from my deck, cooking hearty meals in the old kitchen, and gathering with friends under the soft glow of string lights. The salt-tinged air calmed my nerves in ways I hadn't experienced since my youth. Sometimes I would find myself mentally drafting letters to my late grandmother, updating her on every new development and small victory. In those moments, I realized that the covenant was not simply a set of rules. It was a solemn promise to cherish and protect this land for future generations. I understood that once we let our guard down, there would always be another Diana Blackwell lurking in the shadows, waiting to exploit the wetlands for profit. That realization steeled my determination to remain ever vigilant. Defending something precious is a never-ending endeavor, a lesson my grandmother clearly understood. Outside, as the moon bathed the cypress trees in silver light, I felt the harbor was silently approving my mission. Sleep came quietly, filling my dreams with images of flourishing wetlands, carefree children, and a future free from the threat of bulldozers. Soon after, official news arrived that Diana had taken a plea deal, admitting to lesser charges in exchange for testifying about a bribery network. The revelation sent ripples through Heritage Harbor, eliciting mixed reactions, a sense of relief in some quarters and outrage in others. In my quiet boathouse, I experienced a bittersweet finality. One tumultuous chapter was closing. I was not naive enough to expect forgiveness from Diana, nor did I feel compelled to extend it. The essential victory was that the law had held her accountable, quashing her ability to exploit the community. On television, her once imperious image had been replaced by a subdued, almost hollow figure. The final sentencing, coming 3 weeks after the plea, included hefty fines, restitution, and a short prison term. Rumors hinted that she might leave the state after serving her sentence, never to return to Heritage Harbor, a thought that reinforced the sense of justice that had finally prevailed. After her downfall, normal life gradually returned to Heritage Harbor. The community center buzzed with activity. Book clubs, photography classes, environmental seminars, and weekly potluck dinners revitalized the local spirit. families explored new trails around the wetlands while children collected shells and driftwood for art projects. Sophia even began a monthly legal clinic advising locals on everything from estate planning to environmental regulations. Miguel organized a rotating schedule of events featuring local musicians and artists. And soon enough, visitors came to the boathouse curious to hear the backstory of our dramatic shift. I found myself often retelling tales of my grandmother's steadfast dedication, the labyrinth of hidden documents uncovered, and our hard-won victory against entrenched power. Each retelling reminded me of how precarious our victory had seemed, yet also highlighted the strength that emerges when a community unites to protect what truly matters. The once threatened wetlands now thrived, its vibrant life a testament to resilience. And occasionally I'd see egrets or otters venture close, as if offering silent thanks. In those moments, I recalled my grandmother's timeless words, reinforcing that we are merely stewards of this land, entrusted with protecting its silent wonders for those who will come after us. As I sit here now, watching the sunset paint the harbor in shades of amber and gold, I realize that the true value of Heritage Harbor was never in its development potential. Its worth lies in the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, the graceful dance of herons in the shallows, and the shared memories of generations who have called this place home. The battle for Heritage Harbor taught me that sometimes the most important victories aren't about what we build, but what we choose to preserve. In standing up to Diana Blackwell, I didn't just save my grandmother's boathouse or protect a fragile ecosystem, I helped restore a community's belief in its own power to determine its destiny. Perhaps that's the greatest legacy any of us can hope for, to leave the places we love better than we found them, and to inspire others to do the same. And in that sense, Grandma Evelyn's spirit lives on, not just in the weathered walls of this old boathouse, but in every conservation effort, every community gathering, and every sunset that graces the waters of Heritage Harbor. The covenant that nearly disappeared now stands as our community's constitution, a reminder that what we choose to protect today shapes the world we leave for tomorrow. And while I know there will be new challenges ahead, new Dianas with glossy brochures and promises of prosperity at the expense of our natural heritage, I face the future with confidence, because I've seen what happens when ordinary people find the courage to stand up for what's right. In the end, that's what the story of Heritage Harbor is really about, not just the triumph of conservation over development, but the rediscovery of our collective voice, our shared values, and our power to write our own ending to this story. And what an ending it is, not a conclusion, but a beginning, as rich and full of promise as the wetlands themselves.